Hi everyone, this is Azadeh from the Story Mint, and we are going to have a Google Hangout session every month. Last time Suraya doing and Raymond joined me and talked about their works, self-publishing and challenges of new writers.
Publishing. I think there are three areas to do with publishing that people should get to know. One is the creative side, which is the actual writing of the book. And what a lot of people don't realize is that 80% of publishing a book is the actual publishing and the marketing of the book. The actual writing of the book is the easy part as far as the authors are concerned. Nowadays, where we have what we call indie publishing, in other words, we're not traditionally publishing, we actually do the whole job ourselves. We have to be our own publishers and our own marketers as well. As far as the publishing is concerned, there are two major publishers that we publish our books through. One is the Smashwords company, and the other one, of course, is Amazon, the world-renowned larger company. It's possible to publish on both. I'm published on both, but it's easier to publish, for example, on Smashwords because their form, their formatting and so forth is a lot easier than Amazon. The reason that Amazon is a little bit more technical is because of their after-marketing, and also some might say on purpose, they have certain issues or certain ways of publishing that are different to Smashwords. It's all a question of safeguarding their own patents and goodness knows what else to do with their publishing name. However, it is quite simple. The problem is that if you have a book to publish to start with, it can be quite a nightmare. I remember publishing my first book myself through Amazon, and it took me 9 attempts to actually get it right, the formatting. A lot of that was probably because I had never ever done anything like that before in my life, but it was an interesting exercise. But there are lots of small issues that you have to go over in order to end up with a book which is presentable. And unfortunately, one of the things which indie authors want to do, or if they do, is send their work to agents. If they're sending their work out, publishing and formatting correctly are extremely important. If you get it wrong and it looks wrong, no one's going to look at it, no one's going to read it, and even if you market it for a year, no one's going to buy it. I found that out the hard way. The first book that I had sat on a shelf for 7 years until I met Suraya, and I was reborn again, as it were. I've now since got 2 more books published, one edited by Suraya, and the formatting is probably the most important thing next to actually writing the book. Get the formatting right, and you've got a book which is presentable on the market. The third part is marketing the book. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books and pieces of advice out there on how to market your book, and quite frankly, you need to be in touch with someone who markets, even if it's only to have a chat or to get advice. And I'm very lucky because I've got someone that I can ask advice from and who has helped me. That isn't available to all writers, and like everything else, it costs money, and that's one of the hurdles which all of us have to sort of put up with. We just exist and we just do what we have to do. The major thing is I come back to the actual formatting and the publishing part. That is the most important part, apart from actually writing the book in the first place anyway. With regards writing the book, 3 words. Editing is the first one. Checking, rechecking, and rewriting. It's very hard to tell authors this. It's also very hard to tell authors that when they have published their book, they're not going to get all good reviews. They're going to get something else called criticism, and criticism is really, if they look at it in the right way, the best tool that they've got in the toolbox to help them write. as far as tonight's concerned, I think that's about all I can say.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Suraya, would you like to add anything to that, or what do you think about the process?
If you're a self-published author, one of the things you have to do is to become a very good marketer. Now, being a good writer and being a good marketer are two completely discrete activities. And so anybody who is writing a really good novel is going to face a huge challenge when the time comes to have to actually market and sell their book. So you'll either find that you get writers who are very good craftspeople who are dedicated to their craft, but you won't find their book anywhere or just in remote places, or you'll find a writer who produces a good book, readable, and because they're good salespeople and they know how to market and promote their product, it's out there and it's everywhere and people know about it. And that's the dilemma that every writer these days is facing. I mean, it was great. It's great. I remember when the whole concept of e-publishing first came out. People said, this is wonderful. Writers are now their own publishers. But nobody stopped to think, well, they are now because they're discovering this, that being a marketer is a whole activity all of its own that requires intense concentration and focus. And writing is also an activity that requires intense focus and complete attention. So the writer ends up writing their novel, and if they really want a good product out there, they've got to edit it many times. They've got to get somebody else to edit it. They've got to get somebody to lay it out, or they do it themselves. And again, who in this world is a good format person? Well, they have to be that. They have to do that as well. And so and then once they've got it all formatted and all set up and out there, they have to then start doing all their marketing and promotion. And you use the social media, which is what we're using and have used, and what I've used. And I've been very grateful for the help and assistance I've had, because I would have been absolutely lost without it. Nobody, certainly not me anyway, can do all those things that are required of them to produce a good novel that's really readable and sits in the marketplace with a sense of pride, I guess. So I admire any writer who does all those things. And I mean, I think the biggest frustration writers now face is actually finding the time to write, because they're so busy doing all those other things, so busy sorting out how to do that task of laying the work out and making it look good, getting a good cover design, setting that all up, and then getting it into the various outlets and getting it out there in the marketplace. It's a huge, huge ask. But the one thing I always come back to, and I'll come back to it forever, I'll never change my tune on this, is that if you want to write, and you want to write well, and you want people to come back and buy every book you ever write because they just enjoyed the first one so much, you've got to spend time on producing that product. You've got to make sure it's a really good product that reads well, tells a story well, has a focus, is growing tension that makes people want to turn the pages. You've got a novel that is just the very best that you can produce.
I'd like to read chapter 17 from Issy's Secret.
Right.
Issy's Secret is the first of a trilogy of Enderocene mystery novels, and this was the first one in which our hero and our heroine sort of get together in a romantic situation, which is shall we say, full of hurdles and so forth. And apart from that, the actual story is about Cyprus and what's going on there. And this is chapter 17, which is one chapter I rather like. So here's 17. Cyprus is a wonderful island, but travelling a long distance in a car on a hot day is no treat, especially when there's no air conditioning. That's one main crossing point into the north, and that's at Nicosia and the Ledra Palace. We left the hotel early, windows rolled down, and were on our way to Belapae to try and find Isia's friend, Jamelia. After travelling along the coast for a few miles, we passed Limassol and turned onto the main highway going north. My plan was to get to Belapae as soon as possible, but Jessica insisted we have a quick lunch on the way before we entered the north. Turkish cuisine did not suit her palate. I guess so, I answered. Did you know there's a McDonald's in Noenda? She retorted, nose in the air. As we drove along the highway, Jessica went through notes from our previous day's experience. She'd written them onto a large pad. According to her translation, the man with the shotgun had bad-mouthed Isia, calling her a lady of loose morals. I accepted her version, but knew the man had said something far worse. Jessica pushed the sunglasses up the bridge of her nose and turned back to her notes. I expect that's why all men in the village knew her. Or maybe they were just branding her for another reason, she said, more to herself than to me. A blast of hot air filled the car as a large covered truck passed us going the other way. The rush of air brought with it a cloud of swirling dust that blew across my face and settled in my hair. I shook my head and brushed in front of my shirt. Dust was everywhere. Jessica covered her mouth with a hand and wrinkled her nose at me. She waved the other hand to get me to slow down as we passed an old woman riding a donkey. Large net bags loaded with oranges hung from either side of the animal. With practiced ease, Jessica pulled her camera from a bag between her feet and took several shots. We continued driving. Returning to a note, she asked, "So what of Isia? Do you think she was... And what about George?" I shook my head, reading her mind. I explained, if George and Isia were having an affair, they would have broken all social and religious protocols. Her family would have beaten her and disowned her. I hoped for her sake Isia kept her secret after George died. "I hope she's okay," I muttered. "Well, look who's got a warm heart." Jessica patted my knee. She changed the subject. "Have you found out any more about how the marbles are going to be packed?" "Some," I said. The marbles needed to be packed and stored in a safe way, their recovery guaranteed in case the ship sank. They were going to be waterproofed, and I was pretty sure some sort of compressed air device would aid them to the Mediterranean service. I still had to make inquiries. I thought she might have got onto that. "I guess you've been on my mind too much lately," I said truthfully. "Enda, that's feeble." She slapped my arm and gave a short, husky laugh.
This is from Bend with the Wind, which is the novel that's out at the moment. And the novel itself is covering two main time periods. One is the 1981 visit by the Springbok to a rugby team, which caused a lot of controversy. And a century earlier, there was the occupation of a small village in Parihaka, Taranaki, New Zealand. And I bring those two together because the idea behind that is that if you do something that's unjust, and you think and it might go away, the effects of that might appear to disappear, and there may be no repercussions in the mind of the perpetrator, but it doesn't go away. It will come back. And the 1881 occupation of Parihaka was, and we've acknowledged in New Zealand that was a most unjust act by the colonial government, and in 1981 it all came out again, and the catalyst was the Springbok tour. So what I've tried to do with this novel is to tell the story of two people caught up in that history, if you like. And so they're going off to our main character, Sophie, is going to the Springbok tour, the first Springbok tour, well, the first game where there were huge riots. Here we go. This is Sophie and her friends, Lucy and Clara, arriving at the first game the Springboks are playing against New Zealand in Hamilton. In a wash of blood, the sun gave up its struggle with the fog and disappeared into a halo of gloomy light. Groups of marchers were arriving from all over Hamilton, from Waikato University, Hamilton Lake and the Glenview Hotel. At least 5,000 steam-breathing bodies rubbed hands to get warm. Despite the murmuring conversations, the occasional laugh, and the tinkle of sprinkling fountains, the atmosphere was tense. John Minto bounded onto some raised ground. "Hi, everyone!" Enthused by his wiry energy, the gathered throng cheered. Sophie turned to Lucy. Beaming, she said, "He's great, isn't he?" "Yeah, I'd follow him to the end of the world. That guy knows what he's about," Lucy replied. "Yep," Sophie agreed. Clara just nodded. Ian put his arm around her shoulders and thrust a fist into the air. "Go, John!" he shouted. Clara winced and drew away. John Minto, dressed in a bulky overcoat, reached to the sky like a prophet. A cheer filled the air. He took a deep breath and yelled, "Why are we here?" "No racist tour," they bellowed back. Police cars cruised along the main street, prowling like cats. "Right, let's give them the message," Minto called. The protesters snaked away from the garden place along Victoria Street. The steady beat of their feet filled the street. The fog rolled around them, curling over promotional banners until they hung damp and limp. It nudged up to shop doorways and pinched derelicts crouching there. It draped itself over huddling cars, dulling their idling sounds. It lolled along the sidewalk and dropped condensation on the asphalt, turned stones black and glinting under the feeble light. The city was stretching, yawning. An involuntary shudder rippled through the group. Linking arms, they shouted, "Amandla! Amandla! Power! Power!" The chant rolled through the ranks. Wooden-faced police stood along the road with their hands clasped behind their backs. Protesters yelled, "Pigs!" Sophie cringed, thinking of Joe. The pulsing, bounding feet took her to newsreels of troops going to war. Only today there was no adoring locals wishing them well, no flag-waving patriots, no handkerchief-tossing lovers. Instead, those who were out booed and shouted. The protesters turned into London Street. They came to the first barrier, yellow and black striped boards set up on trestles. They walked straight through them, crushing the planks beneath their feet. The protesters' beat was relentless, inexorable. Along the street they went, chanting, "Amandla! Amandla!